Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We are so happy to have you with us this afternoon for our conversation with Kerry Weber. As we get started, oops, of course, it starts the music again instead of advancing my slide. Uh, so, as we get started, just to let you know, as Zoom told you, we are recording this webinar and we will send you an email link so you can view it online and share it out with everyone you would like to after you enjoy our conversation. And if you have questions, please find the Q&A box and type them in. Please, as we're chatting, feel free to type in your questions, because if you're anything like me, you will find that if you don't type them in when you're thinking of them, you will forget to them when you get to the Q&A section. So I am thrilled today to have with us Kerry Weber. I had the privilege of meeting Kerry at an event for ACP, the Association of Catholic Publishers. And when I went to talk to her, kind of looking at each other like, boy, you look familiar. And we realized that we were going to the same parish. We've since collaborated on some things between Renew and America. And so welcome, Kerry, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really, really honored to be here.
Yeah, we're really loving this, having this conversation series, Women in Conversation, and trying to help women find their voice in the church. And you, have such a great voice in the church. So you were one of the first people I thought of.
Thank you.
And so, you are someone who is so deeply engaged in your faith. So tell us a little bit about your faith journey. What led you to that?
Yeah. So I think that, as for many people, my first example was my parents. And I think my parents modeled faith for me in a way that was really helpful, because it was both all of us praying together and going to Mass together, but also a sense of service and a sense of community, a sense of doing things for others. My father, voluntarily fixed like every part of the parish and the rectory, and the boiler would call us on the weekends from the church. Like, it had this automated thing, and we were like, Dad, it's the boiler for you. And he would go down to the parish and help fix it, that kind of stuff. And my mom would help make meals for soup kitchens, and then she would serve us those same meals at home that same night. So we had this sense of solidarity and this sense of giving that was not, we're giving the leftover cans of whatever we didn't like to the soup kitchen. We're giving from our own table. And so I think both that sense of service and that sense of a desire that was fueled by prayer was really where it started. And my mom worked for the diocese where I grew up in Massachusetts in communications there. And so when I was 16, I started a summer job there, and I worked there for 6 consecutive summers. And my friends were like, "You're never getting out of the Catholic press." And I was like, whatever. And then here I am. So, but the thing is, I actively decided that this is what I wanted to do, right? That this is something that made me think more deeply about my faith and think more deeply about the world, and ask the kind of questions that I sort of had just coming up in my own life, but I would get to call people up and call up experts and priests and religious and ask them the questions that I was wondering, which I often found other people were wondering too. So there's this sense in which sometimes the work that I do is very personal, and I'm able to explore questions that I just genuinely want to know as part of my writing or my reporting, and that has been I think really useful. I think another thing is that generally speaking, I've been able to find parishes that are joyful and welcoming, and that has been really useful, especially as a kid. I have, really good memories of being able to just like wander around the church and look at stuff, even, not necessarily during Mass, but, just this sense of like, this is a place that I can like feel at home and like go and explore. And that's useful. And I think things like the parish
and,
pancake.
and that makes me think of when you were we're recording you and your husband Colm, and the kids were there, and Killian was just wandering the church, and you were like worried because he's wandering. We're like, no, 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 he's exploring, he's flying, and he did. He just, he was
Yeah, I have
curious,
found.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
I found that for my kids, they do like that, the sense of being able to just like go around and look at stuff and not feel like this is a place, again, not at proper times, but like
yeah,
that this is a place where you have to be perfect or always still, that faith can be kind of part of that exploration too.
yeah. And so, you kind of touch on it a little bit, but in an age when there are so many people who are leaving in the church, what makes you stay?
Uh, the Eucharist is a big thing. Is that I believe in what the church teaches about it, and I believe that it is um, a a powerful force in our faith and in the world, and I want to receive it and be a part of that. But I also believe that on the ways in which um, the church frustrates me, that change can happen from within the church, and that sometimes that is a very effective way to do it, and that if people who care about the church but are frustrated with it walk away, um, the church will be lesser for it. And so I hope um, that I can work with other people to affect change in the church. I hope that, or that I will learn more about my faith and learn the ways in which I need to change to make the church a better place too. And that the sense of community of our faith really brings us to that point where we can um, work to be changed and work for change at the same time. And I also think the church fundamentally just is an organization that does a lot of good, right? It's basically the
Yeah,
largest social service agency in the world,
yeah,
and that to be a part of that and to help that move and run and work in the world is valuable. I also think sometimes in the U.S. We put too much emphasis on the various culture war elements of the church that we get involved in, and that's not necessarily the case. Like I don't see as many liturgy wars conversations coming out of Latin America or anywhere else really, like
it's
besides the
true.
United States at the moment. And I think that we can forget that the church is global, and that the things that we're
Yeah.
potentially focusing on here are not necessarily the things that are most helpful, and that other we could learn from other parts of the world.
Yeah, we forget that Catholic means universal.
Exactly.
There's some people who probably actually don't even know that the Catholic means universal.
Right. Yeah, it's good to remember.
Yeah. So you're a woman in Catholic media, which is, a field that has been, dominated by men for a really long time. And so what do you see as unique in your role? Do you see it different from your male counterparts?
So in some ways, no. In some ways, I am here to write and to edit, and I'm here to do a good job, and they're here to do a good job, and we all kind of push each other and challenge each other, and that's what we do. And it is not related to our sex or gender, but in other ways, obviously, our own individual backgrounds bring unique perspectives. And uh, at a magazine that for the first, I don't know, 90-ish years of its existence had
Yeah.
only male editors. Yeah, the women editors do bring a new and different perspective than the magazine has historically have, just by virtue of our experiences in the world. And I think that's valuable, right? I think that having as many diverse voices represented on our staff or in our pages helps to more accurately reflect the reality of the church, and that we can bring views that maybe are underrepresented or overlooked. And I see, I don't believe that I can represent all women or that my voice represents all women, but I do see my role as one in which I try to bring in as many voices of women or of people of diverse backgrounds or people of different backgrounds than myself, so that we do more fully represent the views of the church and the demographic makeup of the church. It's important to be able to lift up voices, to be able to empower people to feel like their voices can be heard, and to raise issues that are underrepresented. And we do that by being more inclusive in our staff and in our pages. And I also think that on some level, I try to work within our organization to make sure that we as an organization are living out what we write about. And I think I'm grateful that we generally do try to do that. But it was an interesting experience for me, because when I gave birth to my first child in 2016, I was the first editor at America to give birth. Now, this is not a particular accomplishment, right? Because like I just by virtue of chance, right? It's not like I did anything. But it was funny because and it's also, I didn't have a lot of people coming before me that were even in the position to give birth as celibate men. So it was interesting because we had to kind of think a lot about like, what does our organization look like in terms of parental leave policy, in terms of flexible work, in terms of all these things that might be useful for anybody with a family, whether that's children or parents or anybody in their circles that they might need to care for. And I'm grateful that the office was the kind of place where we could talk about that openly, and where we could create a parental leave policy that now, either parent gets 16 weeks of paid leave coming out of the birth of a child. And so that's good because it helps mothers, it helps fathers, it helps families. And there's other ways, or it helps you if you need to care for your sick parent or anybody in your circles.
And I know for myself, working in a place where that idea of the organization living out the faith, as well as the individuals within it living out the faith, it makes a big difference. I mean, most people know I've been fighting cancer, and so to be able to work from my hospital if I want, it makes a big difference in and thinking about other jobs that I had, and it never would have happened. And that kind of care for the individual is part of the ethos of the organization. It's a gift.
Yeah,
it really is.
It's a sense of valuing the whole person.
Yeah. So you're a mom. You have 2 daughters. I haven't met the second one. No.
Oh gosh, she's adorable. If I'm in my unbiased opinion.
Well, I just remember Bridget and her little raising up her fist in the video. But what's your hope for them in the church? What changes would you like to see in the church that you think would enrich their lives as Catholic women as they grow?
Yeah, I would love for them to feel at home in the church, essentially, to feel like they have the freedom to ask questions and that they're respected enough to find that someone will help them to figure out the answers, that they have a place in the church, and that they are able to have, visible examples of women in leadership, of women being lifted up in the church, of their examples being respected and their lives being respected, and that they feel respected, that they feel loved and part of a real community. When my first child was born, we have 3, the priest who did the baptism asked us to write like a letter of our hopes for our son in the church, and we've read it for both our daughters as well at the baptism. And I won't read it here, but it includes includes a lot of what I'm saying to you, and it helps us to concretize this desire for them to feel like they are a part of something bigger than themselves, and that they are part of its past, part of its future, part of its present, and part of a community that can help them when things get tough.
Yeah, and honestly, that's part of why we're doing this series, the Women Conversation, because a lot of people don't realize that there are women in great leadership roles in the church, but in their local parish, they see their the priest, and to them that's the focal point, and not knowing that there are both religious and lay women who are in leadership roles in dioceses or in large Catholic organizations. And yeah, so that, part of why we want to have this series and ask people about their stories and hear those things, and put those role models in front of them. So talking about the role of women in the church, where do you see it now? Where do you see it going? Where would you like to see it go?
Yeah, so America did a survey of Catholic women a few years ago. We did one a couple years back, and it was a survey that talked to 1,500 women. So it was a pretty significantly sized survey. And one of the things that came out of it was I think the most troubling for the future was that women were becoming basically increasingly detached from the church, right? That they were not necessarily praying every day. They were not going to mass very often. It was 51% said they prayed daily, and 24% went to mass weekly or more often. And so, not to focus on the negatives, but like a lot of people, what I found interesting was a lot of people who answered the survey identified as Catholic, but didn't identify any actions in their lives that really connected them to the church. So there's something there about the church that's keeping people connected to it enough to say, yeah, I identify as that, but not connected enough to really build those like community connections, which I found to be sort of interesting. So I think there's a lot of work the church can do there. There's like an open door for women who are like, yeah, I'm willing to say I'm a part of this, but there's obviously more the church can do to get people to be more involved, at least on the parish level. But with the caveat that the parish is not the only way to be involved. Obviously mass is important, but there's many ways to be part of the church community. And what we found was that, interestingly, the more that women were sort of like involved in their parish or mass goers, the more likely they were to feel that women's voices were valued in leadership in their parish. So it was sort of an interesting thing. And what you're saying is like, that people who feel like or are living on sort of the outskirts of the church or not as involved in much sort of assume, well, obviously there's no women doing anything in that parish, that I only see that one priest outside every week after mass. When the reality is that a lot of the women that are very involved see women running parishes, right? Like essentially, other than the sacramental duties, many times women are running a lot of the catechetical activities, or running the lectors, or leading the altar service, or whatever the various ministries of the parish might be. But what we also found is that the percentage of women doing that is pretty low as part of the overall group. So like there's a lot of women doing that, but not a huge number of women doing it. The women fill a number of those roles. So there's a chance for growth there, I think, as well. But essentially the vast majority of women, like 80% and 70%, felt that two of the things that really defined what it meant to be Catholic was helping the poor and receiving the Eucharist. So the core messages of the church are getting through. And I think, and that's good, right? And to build off of that core is valuable, right? So that it's good to know, like, these core values are coming through to women. Women understand them. They want them. They're working with them. And then we have to work as a church to be more inviting, to help people be more involved, to help facilitate activities or prayer groups that fit people's schedules, that accommodate the reality of people's lives, that are appealing to people at different age groups or states of life. And so there's more that can be done there. But I think overall, despite this sort of trend toward drifting, in a sense, there's also this sense, like I said, of openness, of a chance for opportunity to bring a lot of people back in if we can find the right balance. And I think things like what your group is doing, we're pointing out women in leadership, or women being willing to say they're in leadership or take on those role models. I did an article after this, talking to a lot of women in leadership who were sort of hesitant to even acknowledge that, to say, well, I just, I do my humble work and I'm just in the background. And we're like, you're a chancellor. You're a chancellor. Like,
Right. Right.
doing a lot of work. Like, and I think
but it's
tend to downplay that, and
that's a societal thing. That women, we tend to do that to ourselves, because women who don't are, oh, they're so brash, there's so many negative connotations where a guy does it and everyone's like, oh, he's a leader, and it's like because we're fighting overall societal things, not only within our own church.
And I think that is, people are eager for those role models. Especially young women that I've met are really excited to learn about the different, often sort of behind the scenes, but not really, ways that women can be in leadership in the church.
So it's interesting because the author of the book that kind of sparked this series is on, and she actually asked a question about the idea of small groups and women finding their voice, and do you think that's kind of an important thing?
I honestly think it's crucial, and it's like, for me, has been like just not even in official small groups, but just like a small group of people who will affirm you when you need to be affirmed and keep you in check when you're like maybe going down the wrong path, or just listen to when you need to vent. Like I think that small faith groups are just so crucial to the life of the church in so many ways, because I do think it can be very hard to feel at home in the church if your one contact with the church is a very large mass on Sunday, and you go and no one says hello to you, and you kind of awkwardly wave at someone you sort of know, and then you leave, and then you feel like, what is, I don't know, why do I have to go here to pray with all these other people when I just feel alone and I should just stay at home? And like, there's obviously, you go for many reasons and then pray and to receive the Eucharist, but that communal element is so important, and because the people of God together are the body of Christ, and if you don't feel like you're part of that, it can be really hard. And even just having a small group to remind you that you're part of that, even if it's obviously like unconnected to a parish or just on your own, is just, I think, very, very valuable to energize you and send you sort of back out into the world with a renewed sense of faith and purpose.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of the things that we always focus on, that it's always see, judge, act, and that act part of it is so important in everything that we write. And and that idea of and I think that women, when we do them with just women in the groups, that we get rid of all of the societal baggage, if you will, that can come along with it, and we support each other so much. And I think that can be powerful.
Yeah, I think talking to people who have had some semblance of a similar experience or frustration is very helpful. And obviously not all women's experiences in the church are the same, but like, there's an element of being a woman in the church that is usually common on some level. And I think that helps to feel like, okay, where I'm coming from, even if you haven't experienced the exact same thing. Just as group support.
So, what suggestions would you have for women who are seeking to find their place, their voice in the church? We share the name with this book, and it really does invite women, share their faith, share their vision.
Mm-hmm.
What suggestions would you have? And
I mean, I think
people?
One thing is sort of deliberate mentoring of Catholic women professionals, people who are, or just women who want to grow in their faith, like parishes that could set up a newer Catholic with a more seasoned Catholic, or a younger Catholic woman with an older Catholic woman. People who you can create those partnerships just for people in their faith life, or especially in professional life. I think working for the church has a lot of challenges because your life and your work are so integrated, and
Yeah.
frustrations with work can make you not want to like pray. You're just like, whatever, I wrote 6 articles about prayer today. I don't want to think about prayer anymore at all. And then you just watch Netflix. And it's like, that's not the point of what you're doing. But it like, when the same sort of topic just permeates all aspects of your life, it can be really hard to separate, like, professional from personal exhaustion or burnout or frustration or joy. And so I think having women who work in the church talk with other women who work in the church specifically as well. A lot of Catholics said that they didn't really have in the survey, said they didn't really have anyone to talk to like about their faith in times of hardship. And that, like, about 50% said they didn't really about 45% said they weren't really very likely to speak with anyone in times of trouble in their faith. And so deliberately establishing those relationships, I think, can be really, really useful. I think willingness to embrace that being a role model or a leader in the church, and be called that, and have women be open to women talking to and answering questions and having those conversations is useful. I think that tuition assistance for furthering training for lay people who work in parishes, people who want to further their pastoral education, having parishes help them pay for that wherever possible is really useful. I think the church, in terms of its employees as well, could offer lead by the example by offering, paid parental leave. And that, I think, a lot of people end up returning to the church during times of sacraments, and making sacraments, taking them seriously, but not making them examples of like huge red tape obstacles that turn people away from the church at the moment they're trying to come back, can be a huge thing, just to make people feel welcome and further that relationship, saying, oh, I'd love to get married in this church, and like, oh, well, you had to come to us 3 years ago in order to do, whatever.
Well, and that's one of the things that we talk about in Baptism Matters is the when someone calls the church and says, I just had a baby, I want to have them baptized, is the response, okay, you're going to need to fill out this form and you're going to have to come here on Tuesday at 3:00, or is it, oh, that's wonderful, congratulations, those types of things, and we get caught up in the stuff that needs to get done and forget the person in front of us.
Yeah, it can be hard, and I think it can be frustrating for someone who's sort of like, especially on the edge of like, okay, I'm going to do this, my mom asked me to do this or whatever, and I'm going to go through it. But if you just, one extra obstacle is like, suddenly they're gone. And there's a certain amount of record keeping and due diligence that people have to do. I'm not saying that that's not the case, but it doesn't have to be like the equivalent of reapplying to college to get the kid baptized.
Exactly. And honestly, that's one of the things that, kind of one of our focuses with that was to say, hey, they may only be walking in the church doors to shut mom up, but if you make this a wonderful experience, if you offer them community, they're going to stay, and they're going to become a part of it. Well, we're getting wonderful questions as we go through here. Someone, Catherine, she says, many women over the years have raised their voices and spoken what needs to be said, but have not been taken seriously, ignored. In what ways do you think this is changing? And, to what extent do you see it changing?
I think that on some level, with the many more ways of communication there are out there, that there are more avenues for women to voice their concerns in a way. Like, you can you could tweet it, you could tag your bishop, you can write for any number of publications. There's a lot of written communications. And so there, on some ways, there's a lot of ways to voice this more than there have in the past. And sometimes you can, in doing so, receive affirmation from people who are fellow lay people, or people who are not in the hierarchy of the church, and that's good too. I think that we have a tendency to think of the church as the bishops, and to conflate them, and to say, well, approval means that the bishops said this was good, or that this was bad, or whatever. And not to say that what the bishops say doesn't matter, but that there's a lot of ways to be affirmed by the church besides through the bishops. And I think that the people of God, that lay people affirming you, and being part of that community, and being part of that voice of the people in the church, and the Holy Spirit can speak through lay people, and women and children and religious in the same way, or more sometimes, and it can through like a hierarchy. And that we have to value that too, I think, not just saying, well, the church this and the church that, meaning the bishops.
We are the church.
Yeah.
And that's, I think we forget that a lot of times, is that, we are the church. We, the laity, are the body of the church. And yeah,
Yeah.
we need to speak.
I think in terms of the trending, I do see people like being more willing, I think, to write off the bishops as like out of touch, or not really relevant. And I think that we hopefully are moving as a church in a place where we're all together, right? That we're working to understand and see each other. But I think that the more we see the whole people of God, lay people, women, religious, priests, brothers, clergy, bishops, as the church, and the more we can kind of desire to get on the same page, that's good. I don't think everyone's always going to be on the same page, but I'm glad that church is big, and that big tent.
Well, and the diversity of the church is one of its greatest strengths. And to come together, I think that's a great thing. And speaking of diversity, someone asked, how can we help minority and or single or divorced mothers feel welcomed and believe they're valued and have a voice?
Yeah. So when we did our survey, women actually said that single parents felt more left out than LGBTQ Catholics, than a number of other groups that are traditionally viewed as marginalized in the church. And I think we have to take that very, very seriously, that there's a lot of ministries for like quote unquote families in a traditional sort of nuclear mother, father, children sense, or for maybe single young adults, or even for seniors or something. But for people who don't fit neatly into any one of those categories, the church often lets people fall through the cracks. I think one thing that helps, especially if you're a single or divorced parent, is childcare. So like if you have to pay a babysitter $100 to go to the women's retreat, where you pay to go to the women's retreat, and then, and suddenly, and you're working on one income, this could be really, really hard. So sometimes just having a parish set up volunteer babysitters where you can bring your kid and they can hang out in the parish center and watch a movie while you pray with some other women is really valuable. And because I think the church has to work to accommodate a lot of different kinds of lifestyle. We can't say you're welcome here, but only if you can meet on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Like, that's it. Like, sorry if you're working. This is the time that you're welcome. It has to be, you have to think about, like, if we're trying to target a group for this demographic, when do they want to do it? Not when can the person leading the group, when is it most convenient for them? Like,
Yeah.
and so trying to do that. And I also think making sure that people know that they can be included in just the regular ministries of the church, right? Invite people to be a lector at mass, a Eucharistic minister, a catechist, an usher, something where you don't need like necessarily a special group for every subcategory of Catholics. You just need to make sure all Catholics know that they can participate in each part of parish life, or and I think that's valuable as well. And that sometimes often is like a one-to-one invitation, like someone who would not necessarily sign up for something, but you say, hey, I noticed you're here every week. Do you want to be an usher? You sit in this spot every week. You want to pass the basket or whatever, and just kind of little things like that create familiar faces, create sense of welcome. And, I know a lot of people who have gone to mass for like months at a parish where they're new, and like no one's ever spoken to them, and it's easy to do, and it's I can't say I've like walked up to every person that I've seen that's new at the parish and welcomed them myself, but I think that like being open to that and is really important.
There was a moment, sitting from the cantor stand, you get a different view of the church. And there was a Sunday morning, and one of the masses, and it was a new family. It was unfamiliar faces, and I'm pretty good with who's see the people I see every week, and this is new. And the kids were being fractious, and I was grateful because no one was giving them the stink eye. Everyone was giving them the
The
we did that.
sympathetic look, yeah.
And one of the
I have been on
kids,
the receiving end of the sympathetic look.
yes, and one of the kids, needed the bathroom, and the woman didn't. She walked up and to the front of the doors are at the against the wall, the back wall, and it was kind of, and this, you could see this woman kind of like pointing and directing, and this young woman who she was an altar server, teenager. She was, I think, had just graduated from the grade school, was in the high school, and she just stepped out from the pew, tapped them on the shoulder, said, "Come on, I'll show you," and walked her down to show them her where the restrooms were. And I caught her a few weeks later. I said, that was an amazing moment of evangelization. And she was very kind of taken aback. I said, for that harried mom trying to figure out where to go, I said, you made her feel seen.
Yeah.
And, you made her feel welcome in this parish by, hey, yeah, no, come on, I'll show you exactly where to go.
Yeah.
And it was this very simple thing. And sometimes, I find I'm a great lover of Teresa of Lisieux. Do those little things.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
they do have
With
big
great love.
impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like what you said, feeling seen is just so important, right? Like
Yeah.
we want to feel seen, we want to feel known, and we know in theory that God loves us and sees us and knows us, but it's nice when God's people show that.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got some more questions here.
Sure.
This person said she works in a parish in a diocese where there are very few women in leadership roles. Most leadership roles are given to ordained men. Yet she experiences great freedom and great compassion in the actual ministry. So she tends to focus on the ministry rather than the hierarchy, yet there's a divide. How do you reconcile doing ministry as a woman, yet having limited options as a woman leader in the church?
Yeah, it's a real tension, right? That's a very real tension. And I think I tend to do what you do, which is to say I focus on what I am doing and what impact that is making, if any, and trying to make sure that I'm doing the work that I feel called to do as well as I can do it. And you know, trying to think about the ways in which um, people like Dorothy Day had no official status in the church, but changed church for the better, change the world for the better, is currently up for canonization, and is in many ways an amazing example, and for all people at whatever leadership level they are in the church. And I don't think anyone would say she was not a leader in the church, because she did not do her work within official church structures. And so I think that I, remain frustrated that there is a limit on where women can work in the church, within the church structures. I do think Pope Francis has made some progress in appointing women to leadership roles in the church. One of my colleagues, Colleen Dully, did an article recently, a couple months ago, about that, and the ways in which there's more, the women recently appointed have been doing really good work to change the church. But there's also like Molly Burns, who is a woman who was, we've interviewed a number of times, and who I think last year was profiled by the New Yorker, who is basically tracking all of the real estate of the church, and tracking this in the context of ecology and good stewardship, and is doing an amazing, never done before project. And she's doing it without any kind of structure, and she is absolutely without being within the structures of the church.
Right.
And and it's amazing leadership work. And frankly, is probably doing it better outside of the church than she could within the church structures. I know that she, in her interviews, has said that the Vatican offered her kind of like a spot to be like in official channels, but was basically not willing to pay like a living wage, and couldn't really, it would limit the other things that she could do. And she's frankly better off at the moment, at least in her own financial well-being, working outside. She's not making tons of money at this, but like working outside of the church structures. And I think that we sometimes tend, despite the ways in which women should be able to be better represented there, we also tend to idolize that in a way that isn't always useful, to say like that's what we should be striving for, when the reality is maybe we are doing better work outside those structures, or maybe we seem more credible to some groups of people outside of those structures, and that gives our work extra power or validity. And sometimes, Janine Gramick just got a letter from Pope Francis telling her, thank you for all your work in New Ways Ministry after 50 years of being shut down and being yelled at by everybody else. Sometimes the praise is delayed, but maybe it comes from a higher group than
Right.
than the U.S. bishops.
Oh, and Loretta, who's our author, she's like asking, who can women talk to openly about their experiences within the church structures? And I think that things like this.
Yeah, I think often it's other women. I do have some Jesuit colleagues who I'm like, what is it? Why is this what is this like dumpster fire of a situation going on right now? Like, about various frustrations who I can send, they can, it's finding those friends who will listen to you, and that comes back to those small communities. I think oftentimes we have to create these things because they are not necessarily just automatically part of church structures. And sometimes that's on the parish level, sometimes it's outside of the parish, sometimes it's getting a group of Catholic or faith oriented friends on Zoom once a month to talk about these things. Sometimes it's expressing that frustration in prayer and saying like, hey, God, this doesn't make any sense, and I really don't love the way that I've been treated, or just being willing to take that to prayer and to express that to God can be useful. But yeah, I think, I don't know, I find these kinds of conversations with women, in the past couple of years there's been a couple like conferences for Catholic women. I was out at St. Mary's a couple of years ago. It was sort of every other year they were having this. They had two of them, but those were places that I found really useful to talk about these bigger issues. It was not targeted toward a particular type of Catholic women or demographic. It was these sort of broader church issues that I found really useful.
Yeah, and you kind of touched exactly on something that someone was asking. That one of the benefits that she's found, and hi Loretta, she's someone who's actually come to a lot of our online small groups, saying that one of the benefits of the pandemic experience has been, Zoom and whatever online forums we've been using, and do you see value in having this continue as an option in helping meet some of these needs?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, even just casually, my friends and I developed a like discussion group kind of where we each brought together. Sometimes we would watch a Netflix series, sometimes we would read a book, sometimes someone would collect a collection of articles about justice or race or some topic that we all wanted to discuss and bring that together. And that's been just like super edifying over the last year and a half, and really kept us talking about issues that maybe we would find ourselves just being frustrated about by ourselves or not have an outlet for. And yeah, I just think that it offers, especially people who are in dioceses that are not as receptive to some of these conversations, or don't just have the number, like smaller areas that don't have the
Yeah.
number of people to kind of make a critical mass of people to do these activities. To have a Zoom allows people to understand that the church is bigger than their parish or their diocese or the country, as we started talking about at the start, that like people from all over the world are struggling with a lot of the same things, or especially all over um, the country right now, and that being able to talk about them is just really, really useful. Even just hearing the questions that people have today is useful to me in terms of being like, yeah, I relate to that. Okay, I relate to that. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not happy that other people have those frustrations, but I do appreciate that there are other people who care about changing those things that are so frustrating.
Yeah, and I know that something that we found was that when we first started doing online groups, small groups, was that we got a lot of diocesan people who normally do the running themselves.
Mm.
Who it was like, oh, I can get just be a participant.
Yeah,
I get to
yeah.
actually, and I know for myself, running the groups even, and I look forward to it. Oh my gosh, it's like, okay, it's like take my breath, let go of what everything's going on, and come together with women. And it was primarily women, though we did have men who came in, but yeah, I went up with some very the last group was a very very feminist tendency.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have those connections and to not we have been so separated and isolated for so long, to be able to connect not just with people around us but from around the whole country is just so
Yeah.
nice. It feels like a tiny little bit of travel in a way.
It is, and yeah, someone else who's been on several of our groups has said, yeah, the benefit of this has been we're not limited to geography. I mean, the last group I was doing, there was someone in California, someone in Florida, someone in the Carolinas, someone in the Midwest, and it was wonderful. And and it is wonderful when you're doing these online, as you said, to get that realization of the bigger church, because we do sometimes sometimes we get our communities become too close, and we do forget
Yeah,
the
it's very
bigger
easy to
church.
think like the entire church is my parish and my priest who gave this horrible homily that I hated last week, etc. I'm not saying this is about my
Yeah,
particular parish or priest.
understood.
I'm just saying like that when you have that experience, you're like, this is it. I am walking away because this person is the church and that's it. And I'm done. And it's good to remember that that's not the case. There are a lot of people in the church, and there are a lot of ways to live out that faith, and there are a lot of ways, like this group you said, like to connect and to find joy and peace and to express the ways in which it can be frustrating.
So, Carrie, thank you so much for this absolutely wonderful conversation.
Thank you for
I've
having
enjoyed
me.
it. I've missed, since you moved to Massachusetts, I've missed seeing you at church.
I
Uh,
know, me too.
Give a shout out for our book, Women in Conversation. This is a great way, to start something that, it gives you, helps you if you don't want to try to come up with things on your own. There are some great stories in here, and you can, hear other women tell their stories. And I think that is one of the really powerful things. It's one of the reasons that we're, doing this series, so that we do get to hear each other's stories, and there is great power in that. So there's the link if you'd like to take a look at the book. There's a sample right there, and there's a promo code. And someone was asking about, because they came in late, whether this was being recorded. Yes, it's being recorded, and as long as you came in, as long as you registered, you're going to get a copy of the recording. So don't worry about that. You will get that, and we'll send all this information out to you as well. So, Carrie, again, thank you so much. Been great to see you.
Thank you. It's good to see you as well. I really appreciate it. I'm so grateful to all the women who joined, and for all the questions, and just feeling present with everyone today. Thank you.
Yeah, and it is so nice to the questions, and to have everyone come together like this. It's great. So have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much, Carrie, and we'll be in touch. Bye
Thank
bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.